trends, if you like, in the development field. Jim.
Will you all get a sound bomb? No? Good. Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, so I really appreciate Mike phrasing the two things I was going to try and do, because someone said to me last night, whatever you do, don't talk about the past. But I was thinking about it. I think actually it is quite important in market systems approaches, because we've had quite a colourful past. And I was particularly struck in Bangkok, where the donor committee had a conference in Bangkok in March on results measurement. And we had a session on measuring systemic change, which Mike kindly chaired. And the two speakers kind of disagreed on the stage about things. And who they were and what they disagreed about isn't material to my point. The interesting thing for me was the reaction of the audience. About half the people in the audience loved it, and half the people in the audience really were upset. And the difference was that the people who loved it were the people who'd been immersed in market systems approaches for some years and were familiar with the debates and wanted to see them aired and discussed and not sort of, you know, swept under the carpet or whatever. And the people who were really bothered by this were the people who'd come for the answers. They just wanted to be told the answers. And the idea that there wasn't one answer was quite upsetting for them. So that's my defense of reminiscing. Of course, it's every old fogey's dream to be asked to reminisce in public for a little while. So I feel like Grandpa Simpson or something. But going back to the 80s, the 80s and the 90s, it was such a different world then. It seriously was, and there were a lot of people trying to provide management training and a bunch of other services to small business, and then microfinance came along and turned everything upside down. And it's quite interesting this morning to have the financial sector deepening example, you know, put very front and center, because financial services, I think, have always sort of nudged us to do more and different. But at the time, microfinance was going to save the world because it offered scale and sustainability in particular. And at the time, we were lucky if we were helping, you know, 100 richly blessed women to sell more handicrafts, and meanwhile the other 10 million had to sort of work out on their own. So the push in the 90s was very much, how on earth do we get more scale and sustainability? There wasn't really the talk of complexity or systems as such. It was really, guys, we need to get serious about sustainability and scale somehow or other. So we actually did 5 conferences, a bit like this one, in the space of 2 years, and reviewed a mass of evidence. And were deeply shocked, I have to say, to discover that the private sector was already providing a lot of what donors were subsidizing in the public sector. And I think it was quite cathartic for many agencies to realize that what they were doing was entirely in parallel and often displacing what the private sector was already trying to do on its own. So that basically led to a fork in the road. Do we just have a lot more humility, a lot more flexibility and innovation, or do we make it a thing? Do we have a market systems approach that can be turned into something of a methodology, if you like? And of course, the development industry doesn't really like more humility, more innovation, more disruption. What they like is methodologies and a thing. So it became a thing, and it was big. It was quite weird, to be quite honest with you. Business development services suddenly took off, and we had BDS jokes and accusations of being BDS fascist and all this kind of odd stuff for a couple of years. So I just want to say, careful what you wish for. You know, if you really want to be in fashion, then be ready for this sort of shock of interest, and also people misquoting you. The Washington consensus uber liberalization crowd were very happy to jump on this. You see, they say privatize everything, which wasn't quite the point. You know, the point was if it's already there, build on it rather than displace it. But that got turned around into a message of no, put everything in the private sector, which, you know, was a little bit different. So I guess I wanted to just illustrate the fashion idea, because by 2003, the World Bank Group issued the cost of doing business ranking, and this was a ranking of countries according to the ease of doing business in each country. And this got 6 times the press coverage of the World Development Report, the flagship at the time, and was deeply surprising, I think, for everyone. And so in the mid-noughties, the business environment reform thing became very fashionable, playing to the macroeconomic training of cut red tape, level the playing field, and walk away, you know, let the market work its magic, and don't get, you know, don't fiddle about picking winners. You know, this was the argument. And at that time, the market systems approach took quite a dip. And kudos to Springfield, who's represented by, I see David at the back here, and perhaps 1 or 2 others, who really kept the flag flying with their training course. We all went through a few lean years. Basically, I was organizing conferences. I did a conference a bit like this for once a year for 10 years. And 2005, 2006 was a bit of a dip, and then we picked up again. And 2008, 2009, we were seeing then the design of big programs, the sort of programs that Patricia talked about, which add up to quite big budgets now coming on stream. So that's a gallop through history, but I guess what bothers me in all of that is that despite having been going for quite a few years now, we don't have enough showcase examples that are identified as a market systems approach success. We really need more, and this would be my one sort of urgent plea to you as practitioners, is whatever we do, we have to get to the point where we have a few more headline examples that are really kind of, wow, you know, that was fantastic. We've got a few, but we haven't got as many as we should have. And the ones we do have aren't necessarily identified as a market systems approach victory. So one of the reasons for that, at the 10th annual conference, we all sat down after the conference and we said, you know what, we've got fabulous stories, we've got great concepts, our diagrams are to kill for, but we haven't got 2 results to rub together. It's really an issue. And so after that, and as part of that, it was 2007. So 2008, we convened a whole series of workshops with program managers in the field of market systems approach programs, saying what's the best you can do on results measurement? Because frankly speaking, you know, headquarters of all the agencies wielding a big stick and saying, we're going to hold you accountable and you have to tell us what you're achieving and you have to use our methodology, usually led to people in the field saying, well, we don't really like the tone of your voice and you don't understand what we're trying to do and we don't like your methodology much either. So we're going to just drag our feet until you go away and think about something else. And we turned that round. We said, well, for people in the field who are very committed to achieving results, that's what we should tap into. There are a lot of program managers who wake up in the middle of the night sweating, thinking, yeah, am I doing the right thing? How do we know that we're on the right track here? And so we need a framework and a toolbox, if you like, an approach that would enable field managers to monitor on their own how things are going. And monitoring was until then a much neglected kind of art, if you like. It was taken for granted that it would sort of happen and it's part of management and you just go and do it. It's actually quite demanding to do properly. And it's also demanding to respond to data that you get back FSD Zambia, we were hearing about data. It's surprisingly hard to persuade people who are passionate about their work that they're going in the wrong direction, even if the data suggests that. So, you know, there are lots of things along the way that need to be addressed. So basically, we codified this as a standard for results measurement, which Beam is picking up on and has expanded on in various directions. What's been interesting is where the support for decent results measurement has come from and where the opposition has come from. For instance, the evaluation profession was initially very against it. It's like, you know, seriously? I mean, this is a thing. You should be happy. But their line, which is understandable, is we've had enough self-reported success stories. We've had enough programs saying, you know, claiming outrageous things for their achievements, and we don't believe any of them. And, you know, that's kind of reasonable. So the evaluation profession went in for a lot of independence. And what's interesting now, and there's a session on this later in the 2 days, is the pendulum's beginning to swing back. That if you are an evaluator coming in at the end of a very complex program, completely independent and fresh, you're going to really struggle to understand it in the time that you've got. So there needs to be some interaction and some understanding on the way. But this whole self-reported thing is an issue. We in development were very good at stringing together a good story because our sort of livelihood depends on it. But what we did, we introduced an audit process around that. So we will audit the results measurement system externally and give a score out of 100 for the quality of the results measurement system. It's still early days. We've only done about 20 audits, but it's, well, people will speak about it during these 2 days probably. Market systems approaches are hard to marry with the incentives in the industry. All the incentives for everyone, to be quite honest with you, are to, you know, come up with a few numbers that look roughly right, that are big enough, and then bang them in and hope for the best. There isn't perhaps enough probing and understanding of what it takes to generate meaningful results data and so on. In fact, there's been a lot of publications suggesting that development only works in the sort of systemic way we would like it to work because of the commitment of individuals like you. Often high-ranking officials in development agencies immediately after their retirement publish works to this effect, but while they were in their office, they found it harder perhaps to say that market systems approaches, for example, were the way to go. But the vision thing, I think, is very, very important. We actually need to be better at articulating why we're doing what we're doing. There were various side events yesterday where I was quite impressed. Everyone who spoke was speaking more or less to pledge their allegiance to this thing of market systems approach. It's something you really buy into. But there are a lot of people out there who don't, as Patricia was suggesting. Events like this help to build momentum and understanding. We do need the big wins. We really badly need the big wins. And we also need to understand why other people think a different approach would be better or an alternative. Industrial strategy, for instance. You could argue that market systems approaches are premised on the idea that people like us, development professionals, are best placed to diagnose the system, understand the market, intervene strategically, not get captured, and really get the best result. In a way, that's the underlying premise. Industrial strategy is a little bit the same, but with government officials doing the diagnosis and the intervention and so on. And I mention it partly because on our website at the moment, industrial strategy is the hottest, most popular area. And there are a lot of countries that are saying, you know what, whatever Korea, South Korea did, or whatever Chile did, we want some of that. And that wasn't labeled as market systems approach, it was labeled as industrial strategy. So there's a lot of books coming out at the moment about how different countries prospered thanks to a mix of protectionism and various coordinated support to different industries. Very striking, very similar to market systems approach is that the same evidence is taken by different people to draw opposite conclusions, even within the same organization. You'll get, for instance, London School of Economics. You'll get professors in LSE saying, you know what, industrial strategy has never worked. And you'll get other professors saying, you know what, industrial strategy, the only thing that's ever worked. Same evidence. So it's not just, indeed, it's not just about, I've got it. It's not just about what the evidence says, but it's how it's interpreted and the values behind it. As Patricia said, we do have to sell what we believe in, not just the mechanics, but the underlying the values as well. Honestly speaking, looking around donor agencies, most of them are center-right governments. There's a lot of pressure to engage more with the private sector directly, with big domestic multinational companies. That's where the biggest shift is at the moment. Now, one question perhaps for us is, can we compete with that? Or another question might be, can we absorb that? Can we do market systems approaches with big companies? There's a lot of froth around that at the moment, and ironically for me, I have to say, there's a lot of talk around inclusive business, social enterprise, and something called Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, which is basically what we were trying to do about 20 years ago, which is subsidize a lot of different people to provide a whole full suite of services and encourage growth, high growth small business. So that's quite fashionable. It's a little bit difficult to say, you know what, we really talked about that a lot 15 years ago. You should read the book. That doesn't carry it. So there is a certain amount of churning going on there. Business environment reform is still very popular as a thing. Perhaps not quite the rage it was 10 years ago, but still needing to be done. I mean, there's a lot of red tape in a lot of very poor countries that prevents businesses from formalizing, even if they want to. And something, again, that market systems approaches can absorb and accommodate, but not, I mean, business environment reform necessary, but not sufficient. No. Yeah. Necessary but not sufficient. I thought I got it the wrong way around for a minute. Finally, what does it take? Why don't we have more big successes? I mean, in a way, I think that's quite an interesting question for this conference. Why don't we have more, after 15 years, say, of doing this stuff, what's getting in the way? And I think one of the factors is that we need real high-performing program staff to do it. I made a list. You've got to be an entrepreneur. If you run one of these programs, you've got to have an eye for a business opportunity. You do have to be a bureaucrat. You've got to be able to administer everything very competently. Joanna's nodding. You've got to be able to turn out a report just like that. You've got to be an academic, or at very least on top of the academic evidence. You've got to be a diplomat. You've got to keep a lot of different people on board and speak in tongues. You have to be able to say the same thing to business people using business terminology and making business sense, and to development people using development terminology and making development sense. That's a trick. You've got to be a visionary. You've got to have a sense of where you're going to motivate your staff. You've got to be physically fit, available to work hard and travel, and you've got to be lucky. So that's a lot. Are such people born or made? This is something we could discuss. Finally, I just wanted to articulate a little